How to fathom the thus come one's true and actual meaning. Good evening, all Dharma friends. Tonight, Han Yishi and myself, Han Ying, we're here to study together with everyone and practice explaining the Avatamsaka Sutra, the fourth ground. We're on page 14 and 15. So we're on the very last third of the page. And maybe we can read the sutra text. 此菩萨之恩知报恩心即和散同住安乐直直柔软无仇灵恨无有我慢善受教诲得说者意此菩萨如是忍成就如是调柔成就如是寂灭成就如是忍调柔寂灭成就尽至后地业 This bodhisattva knows kindness that has been rendered him and knows to repay that kindness. His mind is receptive to the good and he is pleasant to associate with. He is upright and gentle, not difficult. He is free from pride, accepts teachings and advice easily, and quickly grasps the intention behind things people say. Thus, the bodhisattva grows accomplished in patience, and in that way grows accomplished in self-control, compliance, and serenity. In that way, being accomplished in patience, self-control, and serenity, he masters and adjusts the karmic actions of the next ground. So this particular section is about knowing the kindness that has been rendered to us. And this is really important. And basically, I think if people know the kindness, realize the kindness that they have received, then they will also want to repay it. First of all, I'm going to start with a question. What kind of kindness can you think of that we have received? Different kinds of kindness. Parents, that's a very important and basic one. The kindness of our parents. What else? Teachers? Yes. Teachers teach us a lot of things about how to be a good person and also how to develop our mental and physical and social abilities. What else? Good knowing advisors? Yeah. So our spiritual teachers, they might be our peers, our mentors, companions on the path, or they might be our masters and Dharma friends. So those are very important. What else? If you have read the exhortation for bringing forth the Bodhi resolve, that has 5 different ones. So we've got parents, teachers, and elders. Those kind of cover the good knowing advisor too. So there's 3 more. Anybody have a guess or remember? Donors, right. And that's especially for monastics that we rely on generous donors to provide all basic necessities so that we can survive and live and be able to have time to devote to practice and study of the Dharma so that we can also carry it forward into the future. And the first one and the last one, nobody has said yet, so here's your chance. Buddha, right. Without the Buddha, we wouldn't have any of this, right? We wouldn't be here when we wouldn't have a sutra, and we wouldn't have Dharma masters, or we wouldn't be able to study the Dharma. So that's good, Buddhas. And what about the last one? It's a very all-encompassing one. Yeah, good. All living beings. So without living beings, there would not be any bodhisattvas. Bodhisattvas need living beings to be able to practice the bodhisattva path. So in this particular part of the sutra, it seems to be talking about the kindness of the Buddha primarily, and also the kindness of one's Dharma friends. But first I wanted to go a little bit into parents, the kindness of parents, because that is kind of fundamental. If we don't know how to be filial to our parents, which is essentially how to appreciate and repay our parents' kindness, then it would be hard to know the kindness of any other, from the Buddhas down to living beings. Because the first kindness that we receive that gives us our life is from our parents. And the schools at the City of 10,000 Buddhas teach filial piety. We try to get students to understand, to think about what kind of kindness they've received from their parents, because ordinarily young children or teenagers even won't really think very much about this if they're not asked to reflect on it. And when they first think about it, they just think, oh, I really am glad for my parents because they took me to such and such a nice place, or bought me such and such a nice thing for my birthday, and things like that. And we tell them to think about the non-material things. What virtues have our parents taught us or modeled for us? What kinds of models have they been for us? What kinds of lessons on how to be a person have they given us? And then also the most basic ones, like in the sutra that the Buddha spoke on the difficulty of repaying parents' kindness. Has anyone read that sutra? It lists in great detail all the kindness of one's parents, starting with the mother carrying the child for 9 months, and then giving birth, the very difficult process, and then nursing the child, and during that process, having to undergo a lot of physical discomfort and inconvenience, and sacrificing her beauty, her physical form, and maybe her professional career or her time to be full-heartedly devoted to her child, to make sure that the baby survives and has what it needs, and losing sleep and everything that she would enjoy. And then this kind of care and concern on the part of both parents lasts until the child grows up, and probably to the end of the parents' lives or the end of the child's life, whichever one ends first. You're always your parents' child. But then that sutra, in addition to detailing those kinds of kindness, also talks about how unfilial children can be, how unthoughtful and how cruel, because children often do things that hurt their parents without even knowing or even thinking about it. So we know that in the Buddha's time already there was unfilial behavior. And then the Buddha said, the greatest thing is to be filial to our parents. Their kindness is so great that, and he gives many analogies of even if you carried your parents on your shoulders and walked, I forgot, at innumerable times around the world until your feet were ground down to bones and you were bleeding, you still wouldn't be able to repay even a fraction of that kindness. However, if you can cultivate the Dharma, then you have a way to repay their kindness by benefiting them in a profound spiritual way. So once we are able to understand how to be filial to our own parents, then we can start to spread that and start to realize the kindness of the teachers who taught us, the elders, our friends who have exhorted us to be good, and Dharma companions and peers who exhort us to cultivate, and all the people who have supported us physically, emotionally, and mentally, and so forth. And then realizing that all living beings, everything that regardless of whether they are kind to us, treat us well, or treat us poorly, they are benefiting us. They are providing, the things that we need to work on. They are pointing out where we need to work. So, being in the schools, I'm not always teaching, but I deal with a lot of teachers who are facing kids all day, and then they say that the kids are pressing their buttons all the time, and their faults, their temper, their lack of patience is always at the forefront. There's no peace, because you're always constantly trying to do your best for the students, and the students, of course, don't appreciate it. And when you try to, raise them to a higher level, push them to perform more and achieve their potential, the kids, often take revenge by going home and telling their parents how mean the teachers are, or the teachers don't like them, or the teachers pick on them. And then the parents get all upset and send emails saying, what are you doing to my children? So then we need to have a lot of communication. That's where I come in and try to help them understand what the teacher's trying to do, and then it's okay. But it's really just as parents teach students these days find it. They take their parents for granted. They also take their teachers for granted. So it's not easy, but we keep trying to help them understand that everything the parents and teachers are doing is for their own good, and that they should know the intention behind the so-called scoldings that parents or teachers give is really for their own good. And the other thing, okay, so now we can talk about these statements. The Bodhisattva knows kindness that has been rendered to him. We talked about different kinds of kindness, and then the next part is kind of more specific on how he is going to repay that kindness. And in particular, because in the third ground, I talked about how the Bodhisattva is really learning a lot of Dharma, going to the different Buddhas and listening to many different Buddhas speak the Dharma. So now he really knows the kindness of the Buddhas for teaching the Dharma. And so he wants to repay the kindness. And he can repay the kindness by wishing to practice the Dharma and also wishing to propagate the Dharma, to pass it on. So that's the first thing. And then his mind is receptive to the good, and he is pleasant to associate with. You could, I think, literally the Chinese 心即和善, you could also interpret it as his mind is extremely harmonious and wholesome, and he gets along peacefully with others. So this part is more, you could say, dealing with Dharma companions. He's easy to get along with, and he doesn't oppress other people. He doesn't disturb or oppress other people. Because when we cultivate in a community, we all have to get along together. And for example, at the City of 10,000 Buddhas, you're living together very closely. And when we practice, we tend to, bring out the worst in ourselves because we're trying to apply a lot of intensity to our own minds. So we see things, we see our own faults, but sometimes we also see other people's faults very clearly. And then if we are good Dharma purists, we can exhort them to, but you have to find the right timing because sometimes they don't appreciate it. Or if you don't have any affinity with them and there are people like that who they're good-hearted, they say, hey, you've been absent a lot from the morning recitation, and just trying to kind of exhort the person to be more vigorous, but that person can explode and say, well, you don't know what I'm going through and so forth, the situation I'm in, and why are you judging me for being lazy? I'm not lazy, and things like that. So it's really a lesson to learn how to speak at the right time and say the right words. So part of repaying the kindness of our Dharma peers who actually we receive teachings from, whether they're skillful or unskillful, they're all teachings, and it's intentional that we live in this community so that we can rub off all of our jagged edges, and that friction actually creates more perfect understanding of each other and of ourselves, even though it can be sometimes an awkward or uncomfortable or painful process. But that's why, we want to cultivate in a community. We can benefit from it because just that interaction helps us see our own habits and faults more clearly and where we need to improve. Just yesterday, we had a leaving home ceremony in the city of the Dharma realm for 7 women, and it was very interesting and it was very joyful, first of all, because these women, they are all very sincere and they've been serving in the monastery for quite a few years, working very hard. And now when they shave off their hair, they look like new babies and they're very joyful and they look younger, and they're all very happy. And then we had a lot of nuns come from the different branch monasteries from CTDB as well as from Gold Mountain Monastery, Gold Sage, HQ, and the ones from CDR who are already there. And everyone took a turn to give a little bit of exhortation to them. And most of the Dharma masters were saying, okay, now you're a left-home person, you're beginning a new life, and you have to drop all of your previous understanding of things. Maybe before you were a mother, you were used to telling your children what to do. Maybe you were a manager, you told the people under you what to do. Now you're a new baby, and everyone else is your teacher, and you just need to comply and follow instructions, and don't think that your way is better. So this can be hard because some of these women are in their 40s or 50s. They have a lot of experience and they may know a better way of doing things. But the first, these 3 years of novice training as a Shramanarika, they're just learning to, break down the strong sense of self that we build up, the sense of identity and accomplishment that we have as we proceed through life, because we want to get to a point where we see everything as equal. And so everyone was saying, people were saying, even if, your teacher tells you that eggs grow on trees, you have to say yes. And then that person said when she left home, one of the Dharma masters told her that, and she was wondering, how could eggs get onto trees? And then she realized, I should just not discriminate whether, I should use my logical reasoning mind to figure these things out. The main point is that we're just being very receptive. And of course, we're being receptive to Dharma peers who are, of course, wholesome companions. We're not just being randomly receptive to anyone who wants us to break the precepts or something. And Dharma Master Lu, the abbot, was there. He was presiding over the ceremony, and he shared his Dharma talk. I just wanted to share a few lines from it. It was very insightful. I thought he was talking about leaving home. He said, well, some people are leaving home today, but all of us eventually are going to leave home, because when we die, we have to leave our homes and our families. We even leave our bodies. So it's just a matter of sooner or later. So what's the difference between sooner or later? Well, he said the ones who are leaving home now, they're actually going to leave home again. And then what do I mean by that? It's because right now, today, they're leaving their lay home. They're leaving the home of their family. But then they also need to leave the home of afflictions. And then they need to leave the home of the triple realm. So, in other words, become a sage. So now that they've left their lay home, their lay family, they're going to practice so that they can leave the home of afflictions and eventually transcend the triple realm. Whereas those who will leave home when they die, they will go in rebirth and come back into the sixth path somewhere and have another family that they will leave again when they die. So it's just a process over and over. So then Dharma Master Chen, the other one who was presiding over the ceremony, he said, well, today, just by observing the ceremony, you have also planted the seed of leaving home in the future, meaning becoming a monastic. So, and then he said, those who have left home, you have, under DRBA, under Venerable Master, you are the recipient of many Dharma jewels. And it's just a matter of being receptive to them. For example, he mentioned just cultivating the Shurangama mantra, which the Venerable Master really promoted to attain the Shurangama Samadhi, so that one can truly teach and transform living beings. And then enter the Dharma realm and the Avatamsaka Sea Ocean-wide Assembly. That is another, great sutra that the Master wanted us to study, the Bodhisattva path, and also the 42 hands and eyes. These are also tools that later would be useful for teaching living beings. So we have all these Dharma jewels that we are heir to, and that we have now to really vigorously study and cultivate. Okay, so we finished talking about repaying the kindness of the Buddhas by wanting to propagate and cultivate the Dharma. Just as, in our schools, the teachers say, you don't have to do anything, you don't have to give me presents on Teacher's Day. Just really learn your math and really, do things well. Study hard. That's how you repay your teacher's kindness. And in fact, that's also how you partially repay your parents' kindness, because all parents want to see their students, their children be good students and not slackers or getting into trouble. So to be repay the Buddha's kindness, we have to just practice sincerely and diligently. Okay, and then upright and gentle. Now this is the next several is how he's repaying kindness through his behavior. The Bodhisattva is going to be upright. That means the disposition, his disposition is very straightforward. He's practicing in accord with the Dharma. Just as he learns the Dharma, he practices it. And then when his teacher teaches him, he is very straightforward, meaning if the teacher asks, do you understand? If he understands, he says he understands. If he doesn't understand, he says he doesn't understand. So he's very clear, and he really is very clear to his teacher what he gets and what he doesn't get. It's not like some of us or some students we know in school that the teacher is teaching and then says, okay, are there any questions? And the student is already daydreaming somewhere else and didn't even hear that. And so the teacher assumes that everyone got it. And then the next day, homework comes in, oh, it's totally wrong. oh, I have to reteach this lesson. So, or sometimes students will say, yeah, I got it. But then when they take the test, they didn't really pay attention. So in this case, this student is really easy to teach, this practitioner, because he's very clear and to his teacher about what he needs and what he knows already. And also gentle means, in practicing the Dharma, especially in a community, interacting with others, and also taking on certain practices that are maybe ascetic, depriving ourselves of a lot of luxuries or comfort, and just surviving on less, so that we can, focus our minds on the Dharma. There are some hardships, and then this Bodhisattva bears the hardships very patiently, without reacting with a temper. He's able to be gentle and soft and accommodating, like water. If you toss a rock into the water accepts the water. The water accepts the rock without any objections, right? And likewise, this Bodhisattva's mind can accept everything that happens, all the states that test him. He can be as gently accepting as the water accepts the rock. And then the next one is also about his conduct. He is not difficult. In Chinese it says wu cou ling hen. And cou ling is often used, it means a thick forest or a thicket, literally. But it's usually a cou ling, it's a forest of afflictions and all the different afflictions. And in particular, it could be afflictions like being manipulative or flattering or just ignorant. So this means that he is not acting out of afflictions. He is honest. He's not trying to scheme to get more offerings. He doesn't brag about himself falsely, and so forth. And he is also free from pride. That means even though he might be really virtuous or accomplished, he's not proud, he's not arrogant. He doesn't even think of himself as very accomplished. He's just naturally that way. And then the next few have to do with how he reacts to being taught. So he accepts the teachings and advice easily. It means that when people teach him, he really can grasp what they mean, the true meaning behind their teaching. Often the teaching comes in opposing ways, meaning you might be scolded. You might be scolded for something you didn't even do, or you might be taught by many different people too, not necessarily your formal teacher, but it could be just taught by the situation that's happening or the people around you. But he's able to grasp the meaning out of that. He doesn't misunderstand and he doesn't argue or try to defend himself. And he also quickly grasps the intention behind the things that people say. That is, if somebody's trying to teach you one thing and explains it to you, he doesn't turn it around and interpret it in an opposite way. He understands the intent of that, whatever is being taught. Recently, in our elementary school, there was one girl who is always, a little bit difficult for the teacher, and she also is very careless with her work, so she's constantly having to redo the same lesson over and over again because she doesn't pay attention and she's very careless. And then I talked to her. I said, by now this is your third time through. You should be able to, do it pretty well. And she would argue. She says, well, I remember my teacher told us like 2 months ago, it's okay if we make mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes. And I said, yes, I mean, I'm sure she said that for a good reason. Probably you were crying because of some mistake when you were on your first time. And of course, it's okay to make mistakes when it's something new. But this is your third time doing the same exact lesson. And you've already been taught it, 3 times in 3 different ways. And you've been given correction opportunities to make corrections. So your homework really should be perfect by now. But she just wanted to take the teacher's words and make it sound like the teacher was contradicting herself. So the Bodhisattva is not like that. If someone's trying to teach you, the Bodhisattva will, be so appreciative and quickly grasp what the teaching is and say, okay, I got it, and I will put it into practice. So just to review these several things that we talked about, there's 7 things. The first couple were, repaying kindness to the people, the Buddhas, and to our Dharma, good knowing advisors, you could say. And then the second section is about repaying kindness in terms of our conduct, being upright and gentle and not difficult or and also being free from pride. And the last part is repaying kindness by being very open and receptive to the teachings and grasping what they mean. So then the next part is a summary of all of this. As a result, the Bodhisattva grows accomplished in patience, and that patience refers back to his mind being receptive to the good, or we could say extremely harmonious and kind, and he is pleasant to associate with. That means if somebody who is really patient can get along well with everyone and really know what they mean when they say things rather than taking it the wrong way. It's really tragic, I find, that so often people mean well, or they mean something that's not hurtful, but then somehow the other people who hear it get hurt or they get offended. And it's just communication is such a disaster. Recently, I would like to share, I was reading this article. It's by a Spanish philosopher or thinker, writer, who's no longer in the world, but his name was Carlos Ortega y Gasset, and his article was called "The Misery and the Splendor of Translation." It's maybe something that everyone who's translating Dharma can also read, because he's talking about how translation is actually a utopian task, meaning it's basically an impossible thing to translate something into another language, another culture, to truly translate it. But then he doesn't mean that because it's impossible we should not do it. He says rather we should just realize that it's extremely difficult and basically impossible, but we should then try our best to get as near as possible of conveying the meaning that we can. And then he said something quite interesting. He says, okay, the author isn't coming from certain culture and language, and then there's the reader in another language. And then there are 2 ways you can translate. One is to bring the reader to the author's language, to have the reader really understand the author, not only for his words, but for his whole language, everything that comes with the language, which is a whole different understanding of the world, basically. And the other way is to bring the author to the reader's language, meaning you translate him into something that the reader can easily understand in their own terms. He says that most translations are doing that, and that's very good, but he doesn't think that's really translating. He says, okay, those translations come out very beautiful, possibly, and very easy to understand and digest, but they may not. They may have lost a lot of what the author was really, because author's coming from a totally different background and culture and understanding of the world. They might have lost some things just to make it digestible. Whereas if you bring the author's language into to the reader, then the reader, you're using the reader's language to say things, to force that language to say things that's never said before. And it may sound very jarring, very foreign, very ugly even, but it's conveying some very profound content. So he also said that actually it's not possible to really do justice to a translation with a single translation. You may have to do one to carry the style and several to carry the content, because each time you make one choice, you're sacrificing something else. So that just made me think of our translations, and we've done both kinds, I think, from the early days until now, and we're trying to, see what's the best, and there really isn't a best one. There's just, we're trying to accomplish different purposes, but it made me realize that it's okay to be a little foreign looking or very strange sounding at first, because he says actual true communication is also if you're just saying something that has been said before, using words in the same way it's been used before, you're not saying anything new. Your language is a bit dead. But if you're true, and then he says things that are truly profound, you really can't communicate. The only reason speech is possible is because people are silent sometimes when they can't communicate the things that, are truly meaningful. But they try to use speech to point to it. And he's saying that truly deep communication is you're forcing the language to say something it's never said before. But you're communicating a lot in that, even though it's not easy to hear, not easy to digest, and so forth. So that's just food for thought. And the reason I went there was because talking about how communication is often disastrous or is a failure, because we're each in our own world with our own understanding of things. So when I'm saying something, I mean this by it because of my past understandings and connections and so forth. And then somebody else takes it very differently, like especially between generations and between cultures. So all we can do as in cultivation, I think, is try to grasp the intention behind the things people say. And that means try to really see where they're coming from. Don't take them literally by their words. Because often, even if it sounds hurtful to you, often they also, this is the other thing. Children and parents, sometimes parents are, if they're very busy working all day, they're trying to raise the family, but they don't have too much time to spend with a child. We get a lot of children complaining, my parents were never there when I was a kid. Well, they were trying to make a living. But then often if there's a lot of stress, the parents are under a lot of stress, they may say things that they didn't realize hurt the child. And it's not anyone's fault, it just happened. So I think what needs to happen is for the parent later on, when she realizes that, is she just tries to understand from the child's point of view. She could say, I didn't mean that by that, but that's how the child took it when she was 5 or 10 years old. So all you have to do is try to understand where she's coming from without, getting hurt again yourself. So it's communication. You need a lot of patience and a lot of empathy, and you need to make sure your mind is clear of projections and negative thoughts to begin with. Then I think communication can be a lot more successful, because then you're empathizing, you're giving the benefit of the doubt to the other person, and also you have enough samadhi that you're not going to be too sensitive to what they say, meaning you're not invested in how they see you or things like that. But which is really hard with parents and children, because parents are very invested in what their children think they are or so forth. So that's cultivating patience. And then the next part is accomplished in self-control and compliance. And that goes back to being upright and gentle. So self-control is where you're being upright or straightforward. And compliance, you could say, is being gentle. You're complying with the teachings and not arguing. And then serenity corresponds to all the rest. Not being difficult, not acting out of afflictions, being free from pride, accepting teachings and advice easily, grasping the intention behind things that people say. So if you can do all of that, you will be serene, meaning there's nothing that will make your mind move. Or you could say if your mind doesn't move, then you can also be all of those things too. It's there. But I think I would like to let Eva continue.
Good evening. Let's turn to page 16. The first paragraph. Let's read the sutra text all together, the Chinese version. 坐意修行时，得不修习精进，不退转精进，广大精进，无边精进，赤然精进，无等等精进，无能坏精进，成熟一切众生精进，善分别道非道精进。English is on page 17. When to set his mind on cultivating and maintaining, he gains ceaseless vigor, unaltered, undefied vigor, non-retreating vigor, vast great vigor, boundless vigor, blazing vigor, incomparable vigor, indestructible vigor, vigor to bring all living beings to maturity, and vigor that skillfully distinguishes what is and what is not the past. So this paragraph is about what? Vigor, right? Because vigor, this word repeats several times in every single sentence. I believe every one of you knows about the 6 paramitas. Can we go through them all together? What are the 6 paramitas? Giving, precepts, patience, vigor, samadhi, she said precept already. Samadhi and wisdom. Perfect. Okay, these are the 6 paramitas. And regarding the 4th one, vigor. Its Sanskrit is virya paramita. Okay. Virya, translated into English, it means vigor, or heroic deeds, or strength, or power. To be heroic, you must be vigorous as well. If you're not vigorous, then you won't be able to be heroic. So heroic deeds come from vigor. And also, because of vigor, you will be able to gain power. You will be able to gain strength. So these words, vigor, heroic deeds, strength, power, are correlated. For me, vigor comes from persistence and perseverance. So when you're doing things, you don't want to be enthusiastic and active in the very beginning, but later lose your interest and even drop out halfway. If you are like this, then you'll never be able to accomplish anything. So if you are vigorous, then you will be able to generate power. To this point, I would like to share a story. It's a real story, but it's not my personal story. It's about somebody's life. In year 2001, in New York, in this country, on September 11th, there's a big event. What's that? It's a tragedy. It's a 911 terrorist attacking the Twin Towers, right? There was a man. This man is, I picked these stories because I think this man is really vigorous person and very heroic person. This man, he's a very disciplined person. He gets up at the same time every day, and he gets out of his house at the same time every day, and he get on the same subway every day, and he enter his office at the same time every day. So he's a very disciplined person. And one day, which is on September 11th, when he was about to leave his house and go to the subway station, he suddenly realized he forgot one thing. And he thinks that he has to do it. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to prepare for the morning meeting. So he was delayed. And so he left his house a little bit late. Then he couldn't make the train that he usually to aboard. But the next coming train is about 3 minutes apart. That's how it happened to big city. That every train comes, very frequently, probably 1, 2, or 3 minutes. Then you will be able to make another train. So he missed the train that he usually to take, and then he was able to take the next train. And then his office is in one of the suites within the 2 twin buildings. Okay, and then when his train arrived, entered the station, and the door opened, he witnessed the 2 twin towers collapse in front of his eyes. Okay, just 3 minutes apart. And then this means a lot to him as he related his personal experiences with this daily schedule to others. He said that, I think my discipline saved my life. If I never adhere strictly to my daily schedule, I wouldn't get this protection. To be protected from this, tragedy, this disaster. Okay, and I myself had personal experiences about a disciplined way of life, because the Venerable Master always told us, if you don't go to Buddhahood to do morning and evening recitation, then you shouldn't eat. And I take it very seriously. So I go to Buddhahood to do morning and evening recitation every day, except for under some circumstances, I might skip 1 or 2. And then here's my response from doing this. One day, that was many years ago, I was in one of our branches in Los Angeles, Goldwell. It's time to recite the Avatamsaka Sutra, which is at 7 o'clock in the morning. I was actually sitting meditation before the recitation session started, and I dozed off. So I slipped over, and then I had a dream. In my dream, a lot of beings came. They entered the Buddha hall, and then those with sash, not sash. How do you call that? Lay people's money. You call it sash. Lay sash. Those who are in sash, they stood in front of the first few rows, and those who are not in sash, they stay in the middle. And then still there are those who are neither in sash nor normal normal figures. That means they are deformed, they are handicapped, they don't have complete form. Understand? They are not in. Yeah, they're all in the back. And then I was startled, and I woke up. Oh, it's 7:05. I was 5 minutes late, so I ran to the Buddha hall and ring the bell and started to do the Avatamsaka Sutra chanting. And afterwards, I realized, it's very important to strictly adhere to what you're supposed to do, because that will generate a lot of power, and because I'm the person who regularly to do that work. And if one day you miss that session, and then those living beings who are waiting for you, who are waiting for the merit from the recitation of the sutra, will come to wake you up. I have many experiences like that. And another would be, I was in Seattle Gold Summit. I was leading the Liang Huang repentance bowing because I was very tired, so I couldn't wake up. And again, those beings came. I believe those are the beings whose names are on the plaques. And yeah, this happened many times, several times. And then I said, then I realized that, actually, when you're cultivating, you're always not alone, because whether the beings are visible or invisible, they are always with you. And because if they go to the person who are sloppy and lazy and seldom or never go to, do the Buddha's work or the work in the Buddha hall, it's useless to go to those people because they just don't go there. Then they will not, get any benefits from bothering them. So they come to me. So I think that's a good point of being vigorous with your attendance in the Buddha hall. Although sometimes it might be scary. Okay. The sutra text says, when he sets his mind on cultivating and maintaining, he gains ceaseless vigor. Ceaseless vigor. I can tell you a story. This story is one of the Jataka stories. Jataka stories describe Shakyamuni Buddha's former lives. So in one of Shakyamuni Buddha's former life, he was a prince. And the name of the prince is Bodhisattva, princely almsgiving. So this Bodhisattva, he practiced giving. And it's a big, vast giving. Why? Because this prince, he is leading a very poor country. So the citizens in his country suffer poverty. They are very poor. So this prince, he's very compassionate and kind. He knew that the Dragon King has a very precious pearl, priceless pearl. And he thought that if I would be able to get that pearl, then all my citizens will be saved. So he went to the Dragon King's palace in the ocean and requested he made the request to the Dragon King to donate, to give away his pearl. And the Dragon King granted his request and gave him his priceless pearl. However, whenever this prince got a hold of the pearl would drop into the ocean. That means he would never be able to take the pearl back to his country. And then he figured out a solution. He found the turtle, and used the turtle shell to scoop out the water. And then he kept doing this until to the point that he wore his muscle and bones. That means he did this very diligently and non-stop, ceaselessly. And then his deeds, his action moved the celestial beings who are watching him doing all of this. So they feel so moved and touched, and said they all flew down from the heaven to help him to scoop out the water. And then finally he saw the pearl lying at the bottom of the ocean. So this is meant ceaseless vigor. Next one, unadulterated, undefiled vigor. What's meant by unadulterated, undefiled vigor? Undefiled means it's clean, it's pure, right? And I have another story to share with you. There's a Dharma master whose name is Di Xian. He actually is a very famous monk in modern China, probably more than 100 years ago. And this monk, one day, a man came to him. And this man used to be his playmate. They grew up together. When they were young, they played together. So this man was his playmate. He came to him when he was in his 40s, and he requested this monk that he wanted to live the home life, because life is too much suffering for him. This man is very poor. His friend is very poor. What is his job? What is his profession? He's a pot mender. Pot mender. In this country, we don't even know what's that. Pot mender, that means if you have pots or pans or plates or woks that are broken, you send all these utensils to him, and he will patch them for you. He will fix them for you. We don't even have this kind of skills in modern time, but so this is how he earned his living. He's so poor, and then he felt that his life is full of suffering. So he heard that his playmate from childhood was the abbot, was a famous monk in a monastery. So he came to visit him and request to live the home life under him. However, this monk, Dharma Master Di Xian, said to him, "Oh, no, I'm not going to take you as my disciple. Why? First of all, you are old. You don't have energy to cultivate. Second, you never study, you never go to school, and you are illiterate. You don't know how to recite sutra. And also, most importantly, you don't know how to teach living beings because you don't understand anything." And then his friend requested him and begged him that he wanted to live the home life. Out of compassion, this monk, Di Xian, he cherished the old friendship and said to him, "Okay, I'll take you as my disciple under some conditions. You have to agree 3 things. First, you don't want to take precepts. Don't take precepts. Second, don't live in a monastery. Why not taking precepts? Because you have to go through a lot of hardships and training before you are allowed to take precepts. And I don't think you can take it. You can bear it. And why not living in a monastery? Because you're illiterate. You don't know how to recite sutras. If you stay in the monastery, people will look down on you and bully you. Okay, can you do these two things? He said, yes, I can do it. And if I don't live in the monastery, where should I live? The monk told him, go to the countryside and find a small, poor temple, shrine, where there are not many people living there. Okay, there are many small, poor temples in the countryside. Find one and stay there, and never come back. Stay there. I will make arrangement for you. I'll send several Dharma protectors, lay Buddhists, to support you. They will send you money every month. They will send food, rice to you every other day. And I will also send you an old lady who is also a Buddhist. She recites the Buddha's name, Amitabha Buddha's name, every day. I'll send her to you. She will cook lunch and dinner for you. She will also wash clothes for you. You stay there. Don't come out. Okay? He said, okay, I can do this too. And what is the third thing you want me to do? The third thing is that you have to stay there and recite the Buddha's name day in, day out. Don't go anywhere. If you feel tired, take a rest. When you recover from your tiredness, you continue to recite Buddha's name. Okay? Although this man is he's illiterate and he's stupid and old, but he's simple-minded and can be easily taught. He said, I agree to do all these 3 things. So the monk said, okay, now I can shave you. So after he was shaved, he ran to the countryside and find a place and stayed there and recite the Buddha's name. He never go anywhere in 3 years. Okay, so 3 years later, one day, when the old lady came to cook for him, he said to the lady, "Old lady, don't come tomorrow because I'm going to the city to visit my relatives and friends." And the lady said, "Okay, I won't come tomorrow, and have a good trip and enjoy your trip." So next day, this man went to the city to visit his relatives and friends. And the following day, this old lady came back to check if this old monk came back or not. She was standing outside of the small temple, which is worn out and doesn't even have a door. She called his name outside the door, outside of the house, but there's no response. She felt very strange and entered the room. And she saw this old monk standing in front of the window and facing the west. In his hand, there's a recitation beads, string of recitation beads. And she felt very strange. And when she, got closer to him, she found that he is already dead while he was standing there. Throughout her life, she never saw this kind of things happen, and she was very nervous. So she went to the other Dharma protectors who supported him throughout the 3 years, and none of them understood what this meant. And then they were very shocked. They didn't know how to deal with this, so they went back to the big temple where Dharma Master Di Xian lived and brought him here. When this monk saw all of this, he realized, this is a great hero. He has achieved accomplishment. Most of the Dharma masters who can lecture, who give lecture who are eminent monks who live in famous temples cannot make it. He's a real hero. Okay, so what does this result come from? It comes from vigor, because this simple-minded can be easily taught illiterate old guy. He's useless. Although he's useless, but he did one thing right. That is, he single-mindedly, ceaselessly recite the Buddha's name for 3 years. Okay? This is vigor. Next one, non-retreating vigor. So if you're vigorous, you are not subject to retreating. You will not slack off from your cultivation. Vast, great vigor, backslide. You will not backslide from your cultivation. Vast, great vigor, you do not apply vigor upon yourself only. You can expand your vigor to reach out to other living beings and cause others to be also vigorous in their cultivation, with their cultivation. Boundless vigor is very similar meaning. Your vigor is boundless, it's endless. Blazing vigor, blazing like fire, it will never extinguish. It keeps burning. Incomparable vigor, nothing can compete with you. Nobody can compete with you or compare with you. It's incomparable vigor. Indestructible vigor. Because of your vigor, you are indestructible. Vigor to bring all living beings to maturity. No matter how stubborn or difficult living beings can be taught, you never give them up or abandon them. You keep teaching them until they become mature with their cultivation and perfect their cultivation. Vigor that skillfully distinguishes what is and what is not the path. So you know what is accord with the Dharma, what is not accord with the Dharma. You know what's demonic Dharma, what's not demonic Dharma, and what's right Dharma, what's improper Dharma. We have 8 minutes left. Any questions?
I can share an example. I see a lot of, besides Venerable Master's vigor, which is everyone is very clear about, I think. Even in our first generation of disciples, I also find a lot of models of vigor. And one time I asked one of our senior monastics, how can you be so vigorous? You all are much more vigorous than the later generations. And she said, well, it's just because of our vows. Made a vow that as long as it's something, a public job, a public thing that people ask me to do, I will, as long as I have the time and energy to do it, I will say yes. So it doesn't matter how I'm feeling or my personal preferences or anything, and if it's something for myself, then that always goes on the back burner. So often we find there's overcommitting, like because of the vow, they will say yes to a lot of things, and then sometimes now in age, as they're more aging and the body doesn't cooperate, then it can be a lot of suffering for them. But somehow the power of the vows just carries them forward, and also the habit of being vigorous just makes them able to go, without much sleep and with overcoming pain and any kind of discomfort, to be able to keep sharing the Dharma and doing the work to keep the monastery and the Sangha running. And so it's very inspiring. We said that if we finished and there was extra time, we were either going to sing or dance, right? Question.
The principle of the story. Okay. When you are doing things and you persevere with what you are doing and insist doing it continuously, ceaselessly, and then in the long run you will get response. That's the point of that story. And this is what he learned. I said that he told people this means a lot to him, because if he is a sloppy person who constantly do not go to office on time, and then he wouldn't be able to get this response. That is his understanding of this incident. He was supposed to take the same train as usual, but that day something happened and he couldn't contribute, because if he didn't get ready, he wouldn't be able to do his presentation during the meeting, and because of that, it held him back for 3 more minutes.
I think it's not easy to rationalize. But it's just that this person said that if he felt that it was because of his practice of being very disciplined. We don't really know what happened, but it was his interpretation, I think.
And I also think that discipline is very important in our cultivation, because, like I said, that if it's time to do something and you go and do it on a regular basis, then you will be able to generate a lot of power, which is invincible power. Although you don't see it, but the power, the energy is there. So going to Buddhahood is not nonsense, it's not useless action. It's a markless practice. Markless. A cultivation without markless practice. So you probably don't think it's nothing big deal, but actually it really help. It really help not only yourself, but numerous living beings.
I will confess that I'm not as vigorous as my Dharma companion here. And then one time when I was a novice, sleep was a very big obstruction for me. I constantly overslept and slept during ceremonies too. But anyways, I didn't get any responses like she got, obviously, because I wasn't as vigorous. But I did get the master coming by because we were on a delegation and I overslept. And we were trying to sleep sitting up. So I was still not able to wake up even though I heard my shishong, my Dharma brothers, shook me and said, "Okay, let's go." And then they all went to the Buddha hall, and then the master came in, with his cane, kind of in the dark, and he's like, "Boom, boom, boom," and then I heard, and then he said, "Huh? Who's in here?" And then I said, "Shifu, it's me. I'm getting there. I'm going to the Buddha hall now." So that was a really good message for me, that just trying, because I didn't get any responses like invisible ones, so he had to personally come and knock me awake and impress upon me the importance of doing the ceremonies. And then I think the power also that doing this very disciplined, keeping a routine, very disciplined, it builds your habits. It erases your bad habits of being, whatever lax and or just choosing according to personally, oh, I feel like doing this now, I feel like doing that tomorrow. But it just, having that habit pattern, it just carries you along effortlessly. You don't have to think about it. You just do it because it's time and that's what everyone's doing.
We don't need to do the dance.
Okay. That's good. Any last question? See what? Right. Oh yeah, we should. Up in the city of 10,000 Buddhas, we start the Guanyin session this evening actually, but then tomorrow is the full day. So hope everyone has a chance to go, to be vigorous. We can transfer the merit. Oh, question? Yes. Okay, yes. Is it going to be webcast? Is it going to be webcast? Dedicate the merit. May every living being, our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may their minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light break the darkness of their endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. We can bow to the Buddhas.